Poland is a land power. Look at a map, and that fact becomes almost embarrassingly obvious. Its entire strategic history, every war it has ever fought, every border it has ever defended or lost, runs east to west across flat ground. The threats it fears most arrive by land. The alliance it depends on most moves troops by land. And yet on 13 August 2026, in a shipyard in Gdynia, Poland committed somewhere between $3.5 and $4 billion to launching a warship. Not a patrol boat, not a coastal defense vessel, but a full multi-role frigate stretching 138 meters, displacing 7,000 tons, armed with vertical launch cells, anti-ship missiles, and a combat management system capable of tracking and engaging threats simultaneously across the air, surface, and underwater domains. A warship that won't even be handed over until 2029. Here is the paradox. The country most threatened by land, spending more on defense as a share of GDP than any other NATO ally at 4.8% in 2026, chose to make its most visible new military investment a ship. Not just any ship either, but a British-designed ship built by Polish workers, carrying Norwegian missiles, a French combat system, and British air defense weapons. It took an entire alliance to build one frigate. The question worth sitting with is why Poland decided the Baltic deserved that kind of effort, and the answer is not what most people assume. The ship is called ORP Wicher. That name carries weight, and the people who chose it knew exactly what they were doing. The original Wicher served as the flagship of the reborn Polish Republic, a destroyer commissioned in 1930 and the first symbol of a modern Polish navy. On the 3rd of September 1939, 2 days after the German invasion swept across the border, that Wicher was the only destroyer left defending the Polish coast, every other ship already ordered to flee to Britain, and German aircraft found it off the Hel Peninsula and put it on the seabed. The Polish Navy has been carrying that name ever since. Reaching back to reclaim it for the first frigate of a new generation is not sentiment. It is a statement of institutional memory delivered in steel. The 2026 Wicher was constructed inside a production hall at PGZ Stocznia Wojenna in Gdynia, and because of that, its launch required a solution that sounds like a logistics puzzle someone invented for a television program. Workers loaded the 6,000-ton hull onto self-propelled modular transporters, rolled it out of the hall, positioned it above a semi-submersible barge called BOA Barge 33, and then floated the whole assembly into the Gulf of Gdansk as the barge submerged beneath it. It is a deeply undignified way to move something this expensive, and it worked without a hitch. President Naraki and Prime Minister Tusk attended the christening on August 12th, and so did Lord Coker, the UK's Minister of State for Defence. The British presence was not ceremonial. The design for this ship comes from Babcock International, and specifically from an architecture called the Arrowhead 140, which also forms the basis for Britain's own Type 31 frigates currently being assembled at Rosyth. Poland and Britain are, at this precise moment in history, building different versions of the same ship for different navies at different shipyards. This is either a masterclass in Allied industrial cooperation or the kind of arrangement that makes defense procurement historians quietly pour themselves a drink. Before getting into what the ship actually does, it is worth sitting with the Baltic for a moment, because the Baltic is not a comfortable body of water right now. It is a semi-enclosed sea stretching 1,600 kilometers, shared by 9 countries, including Russia, and accessible to the wider Atlantic only through narrow straits controlled by Denmark and Sweden. NATO's eastern flank runs directly along its southern shore. Over the past several years, the Baltic has become the location of damaged undersea cables, suspected infrastructure incidents, and persistent questions about vessels operating without clear identification. The deterrence question in the Baltic is not abstract. It is about who can put capable platforms into that water, sustain them there, and deny an adversary easy freedom of movement. Poland's navy, before Wicher, was not equipped to contest that question. Aging frigates and submarines acquired during a different era and a different strategic environment form the bulk of the current fleet, and the Miecznik program, of which Wicher is the first of 3 ships, represents the answer to a capability gap that Polish naval planners have been staring at for over a decade. But here's the thing. None of the investment Poland has made in land forces, in F-35s, in tanks and artillery, changes what happens in the Baltic if a hostile actor can operate freely at sea. Undersea infrastructure, including pipelines and communications cables, runs through that water. Supply lines for any sustained NATO land campaign depend on ports remaining functional and sea lanes staying open. A navy unable to project into the Baltic is a navy that cannot protect the conditions that make everything else work. That is the actual argument for Wicher, not the ship itself, but what it represents in terms of Poland's willingness to cover parts of the alliance's collective security burden that it previously left to others. The Miecznik program started formally in July 2021 with a contract for 3 frigates, originally valued at around 8 billion Polish zloty, which translated at the time to roughly $1.86 billion. By late 2023, after contract amendments, that figure had climbed to approximately 15 billion zloty, closer to $3.5 billion, with Breaking Defense reporting a figure approaching 4 billion by the time of the launch. The costs of ambition compound, it turns out, in broadly predictable ways. Babcock's Arrowhead 140 design was selected in March 2022, and a design license agreement followed in October 2023. First steel was cut on 16 August 2023, and the keel came down on 31 January 2024. Going from keel laying to launch in roughly 2.5 years for a ship of this complexity, at a yard that had not built a warship of this class before, is a genuine industrial achievement by any reasonable measure. The second ship, ORP Wicher, already rests on its keel, laid in December 2025, with launch scheduled for September 2027. Construction of the third ship, ORP Wicher, began in April 2026, and delivery of all 3 is planned between 2029 and 2031. The consortium that assembled Wicher is a detailed study in how modern warships actually get produced. PGZ, Poland's state armaments group, leads the whole effort. PGZ, Stocznia Wojenna, and Remontowa Shipbuilding handle the physical construction in Gdynia. Babcock supplies the design and the technology transfer that underpins the entire program. Thales UK provides the Tacticos combat management system, plus sensors and an anti-submarine sonar suite, on a contract worth more than 400 million euros. MBDA brings the KMM family of surface-to-air missiles, including the longer-range KMM-MR variant being developed jointly by Britain and Poland. Kongsberg, the Norwegian firm, covers the surface attack role with naval strike missiles. And that's when the full picture becomes genuinely interesting. The warship Poland is building to defend Polish waters was designed by a British company, armed with British missiles, guided by a British-French combat system, and equipped with Norwegian anti-ship weapons. This is not a criticism. This is simply what Allied industrial integration looks like in practice, which is a collection of different countries' best available systems assembled around a common hull because no single country can efficiently develop all of them on its own. What Wicher actually delivers is worth being specific about. The ship displaces around 7,000 tons fully loaded, reaches 28 knots, and can operate for 30 days without replenishment across a range of roughly 8,000 nautical miles. 32 Mark 41 vertical launch cells carry the KMM-MR surface-to-air missiles. Naval strike missiles handle the anti-surface role. Anti-submarine sonar and a full sensor suite tie the picture together. By comparison, the British Type 31 frigates, built on that same Arrowhead 140 design, are not being fitted with vertical launch cells in their baseline configuration, which means Poland, the country newer to this class of warship, is buying a more heavily armed version than the design's country of origin. Make of that what you will. The KMM-MR element deserves a closer look. This weapon does not yet exist in its final operational form. Britain and Poland are developing it jointly, which means that when Wicher enters service, it will be among the first platforms to deploy it for real. Poland is not lifting a capability off a shelf. It is partly funding the development of the very capability it will then operate, which is a different kind of commitment entirely. Babcock, for its part, has publicly disclosed substantial losses on the British Type 31 program, with around £140 million set aside to cover design changes and rework on the first Royal Navy ships. Export success in Poland doesn't erase those losses, but it does demonstrate that the underlying design attracts serious customers, and that the technology transfer model is working well enough for a second major navy to stake its regeneration program on it. Indonesia has also selected the Arrowhead 140, which means 3 navies are now building variants of the same British-designed hull. ORP Wicher launches in September 2027, and that story will be covered here when it arrives. Beyond the 3 ships currently under contract, Poland also holds an option for 5 additional Miecznik frigates, which would more than triple the eventual fleet. Whether that option gets exercised depends on budget, on how the first 3 ships perform in service, and on how the security environment across the Baltic develops over the next decade. The option exists, and the industrial infrastructure being assembled right now in Gdynia is sized for a program that could eventually run much larger. The ceremony on the 12th of August drew 2 of the most powerful political figures in Poland, plus a British government minister, and that is not a standard attendance list for a ship launch. Tusk specifically mentioned that the program represents thousands of jobs for Polish workers, a framing that points to something beyond pure defense logic. Miecznik is a political investment in the argument that Poland can build things, not just purchase them, and the technology transfer component of the Babcock deal exists precisely so that Polish workers and engineers accumulate genuine expertise rather than simply assembling imported components under foreign supervision. PGZ Chief Executive Officer Adam Leszkiewicz described the launch as one of the most important milestones in rebuilding the operational capabilities of the Polish Navy. And that choice of word, rebuilding rather than building, is deliberate and precise. Poland once had a serious naval tradition, lost it through the circumstances of the Cold War and the priorities of continental defense, and is now systematically reconstructing it, ship by ship, skill by skill. Which brings the story to where it actually matters most. Wicher alone does not shift the balance of power in the Baltic. Neither do 2 or 3 Miecznik frigates operating together. No single platform accomplishes that. What shifts the balance is sustained presence, and sustained presence requires platforms that can reliably be there. Poland's current aging fleet cannot maintain that presence across the coming decade. The Miecznik ships can, once they enter service, and that makes them the enabling condition for everything else Poland is trying to build. Without them, Poland's investment in Baltic security stays theoretical. With them, it becomes something an adversary has to account for in operational planning. The country most threatened by land decided the sea matters anyway. The country that lost its first Wicher to German aircraft in 1939 put that name back on its most capable warship and rolled it into the Gulf of Gdansk on a submerged barge at 6 in the morning. The ship won't be ready until 2029, and in some meaningful sense, it is already doing its job, because its existence changes what any adversary operating in the Baltic has to plan for. And planning is where deterrence actually lives. The Baltic is watching. For the first time in a long time, it has something to watch for. If the gap between what a defense program promises on paper and what it actually delivers in practice is the kind of question that keeps you interested, this channel covers exactly that territory.